majority of our time as human beings is spent at work. And what we don't do is bring the entirety of who we are into our job, into how we show up every single day.
If you're sitting there thinking there's no way, I could never imagine my company could ever be that way, it can. It absolutely can. And it starts with one person.
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Bricksteins, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anniston Blair Bricksteins. And today's episode has been a long time coming. Actually, we've wanted to record this episode for at least a year now. We've been speaking about it. And I'm really glad that we've delayed until now, because it's no longer an episode. We've decided to turn this into a little series where we're going to launch a number of episodes on this topic, because it has brought the most profound shifts and changes in not only our lives of individuals that we know and have shared the content with, but entire organizations. And so we're going to talk to you today about simple practices and principles that we've adopted in our own lives, and then turned it into what is my company today and what I do by bringing these principles and practices into small and large organizations that create big and long-lasting shifts inside companies. Before we get started, I want to preface right up front. Whether you have a day job and you work a 9 to 5, or whether you are aspiring to own your own business, or you want to be a solopreneur, or you run an entire organization with thousands of employees, this episode and the entire series is for everybody, because you can adopt every one of these principles individually, or if you lead a team, you could bring this in as a collective. I want to just share this with you. I used to believe that you have a personal life, you have a professional life, and then you have relationships with, say, your partner or your spouse, and then you have relationships with friends, and then you have relationships with, clients, customers, and so on. And I would compartmentalize every single area of who I was as a person. And what we want to challenge you in today's episode is in being you 100% of the time.
It's so easy for us to develop these identities of, this is who I am at home. This is who I am with my friends. This is who I am at work. And I think that last one especially is true for a lot of us, because we inherit these expectations of, this is how you are expected to show up in the workplace and in the boardroom and in your office and with your clients or with your colleagues. And this kind of behavior is okay, and this kind of behavior is not, and this is kind of in between. And so we're always, wanting to fit in with the norm, and because that feels safe, that feels what is most protected. And what Rudi and I want to share with you guys through this series is really our story. And I think it's very natural that when you've gone through something and you've learned a really big lesson in your life, the natural inclination is to want to turn around and to teach it, because we believe wholeheartedly through our own experience in the benefits of doing what we're going to be talking about with you guys. So to give you a little bit of a backstory and take it back into our story, when Rudi and I met each other almost 13 years ago, we were both already seekers. We are, if you've listened to this podcast, we are very into personal development, spirituality, and all about really improving ourselves, because every time we improve ourselves, we feel better and our life gets better and we're more abundant and we're happier. And so we keep reaping the benefits. So we keep doing the work and then we reap the benefits, and that's how it goes. So early on in our relationship, we would very quickly, we developed a practice of waking up in the morning and meditating. And we started projects like we were writing books and sharing content online. As Rudi has shared before, we started hosting events in our home. And all of this was this growing, unbelievable part of our life. However, we both still very much had day jobs. Rudi was working in his own company that he had started with his brother. I was working for a company in corporate America. So Rudi eventually decides to leave his company, and we move to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where we'd always wanted to move. And then he gets a job offer. And this job offer happens to be for the same company that I work in. And it's a high-level position, and it's a position that would require him to be leading all of the sales teams and really responsible for all of the revenue that happens in the company. And at that point, Rudi had made the decision that if I'm going to go back into corporate America after I've left it for so long ago, and he's an entrepreneur and he started his own companies, but if I'm actually going to go back to working for somebody else, then I'm going to do it my way. And I'm going to show up as me 100%. And I'm going to bring everything that I've learned into the business.
So to give you a little more context to this, I had my own company at the time. I actually had 3 businesses, and I desperately wanted to be a coach. I desperately wanted to be a speaker on stage. I wanted to impact people, and I wanted to share and teach all of what I had been learning over what was at that time about a 15, 20-year period. But I didn't believe it was possible to do that in my own business. So I left my business when we moved to Wilmington. I literally separated from all of my businesses, sold off some of my assets, and my intention was to now write a book and to publish a book and to start a coaching and speaking business, because I didn't think that it was possible to do it where I was at. And then my phone started ringing and I started getting offers to join Anniston's company. And every time they came back with another offer, I kept saying, no, that's not part of my plan, because my plan was to start speaking, coaching, supporting, and developing people.
And naturally, you have in your mind, you think like, this is what this has to look like. And we only knew from some of the people that we had learned from ourselves. And we had seen, they had left their jobs and started their coaching business, and they were very much outside of corporate America. And so that became almost like our mantra. Well, when we get out of corporate America, we'll be able to be spiritual teachers and coaches and be free to say what we want and do what we want. And we always thought it was an either or. We never imagined in our minds that it was kind of like a both and, where we could actually do both and do it in business. So Rudi accepts the position. Now, from my vantage point, I was really nervous because I had been in this company for many years. I knew all the players, incredible people that we still know and love today. But the culture of the company was not one that was open to, let's say, sitting around in a boardroom and talking about things like intention and meditation and manifestation. We didn't have a lot of coaching happening, and the conversations were typical, looking at P&L reports and looking at sales figures, and then raising targets and asking people why they aren't hitting their targets, but never actually asking why aren't they hitting their targets. Maybe it's something going on with them. So when Rudi came in, he said to me, well, I actually went to him before he started, like right before his first day. And I just said, babe, I know you're not going to filter yourself, but just be aware that there might be some people that are resistant, that might not be open because it's going to be very different for them. And he just looked at me. He's like, well, then it is. Like, let it be. But I refuse to change who I am. And if it doesn't work and it's not a fit, then I'll leave. And I was like, okay. So he came into the business, and it was honestly one of the biggest blessings in my life to be an observer. He simultaneously as my husband, but also became one of my greatest teachers in that period in our lives, because I got to see firsthand what happened as he approached the business as a coach and as someone who really truly cared about each and every individual that was working in that organization, because they're human beings first and foremost before their job titles. And when he would see sales results, for instance, for individuals on that team, he wouldn't see weakness. He would just see, wow, there's a lot of area for improvement. How can I support this individual? So he would have coaching conversations with them. When he looked at our schedule of all these meetings and all, he took out a lot of what was unnecessary and just focused on what would actually really impact the individuals. And in doing so, people not only became more accountable and engaged in their own jobs and really wanting to show up because he was holding this really high vision for them, and they started to believe that it was actually possible, but also because the sales actually started to rise. So he was giving them these tools that they could bring into their business, like making sure that they are addressing their limiting beliefs, making sure that they're setting intentions, making sure that they're managing their energy, and him giving them tools of how to do that. And the results of it was month over month, and then what became year over year, unbelievable revenue growth. He didn't touch the product. He didn't make any fundamental changes to the programs. It really was just touching the people. And he demonstrated for me what it looks like when you show up fully as yourself. You bring this total power with you to shine. And he was shining, and he was getting the attention of the entire organization. In fact, one of the last things he did, which if you would have told me that he would have been invited to do this, I would have laughed at you. But before he left this organization, he was brought in to speak, and he helped the entire company set an intention together, a big intention, and he cast the vision for them. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And that company continues to thrive today. So what we want to talk about are those tools that he brought in, and that now he continues. This is what he does. That he brings this into businesses now, and he does exactly what he did there, but he teaches leaders how to do it for themselves and for their own companies. And then he gets to see entire culture shift.
I want you to think about the information that you're going to hear should you choose to continue listening to this episode, and specifically the series that's going to follow this episode. Regardless of whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you run a sales team, whether you have your own company and you're a CEO or an executive, or whether you're just an individual who has a day job who clocks in and out, all of this is going to translate. So we said that in the start of the episode, and I want to remirror that information to you again, because I want to challenge you to stick through this and ask yourself, how can you create the shift in your life that you seek? The reason I focus so heavily in business today and bringing these concepts into businesses is because the majority of our time as human beings is spent at work. And what we don't do is bring the entirety of who we are into our job, into how we show up every single day. And if you're anything like me, you compartmentalized yourself, your life, your relationships, your friendships. And so when you showed up at work, you showed up in a function and you stopped showing up as a human being. One of my favorite lines when I meet a new leader of an organization when they bring me in is, why did you hire the people that you hired? And then they tell me about how brilliant the people are. One follow-up question to that is, well, why don't you allow them to be brilliant? Because the moment you put somebody in a job function and you ask them not to bring in their beliefs, not to bring in their personality, not to bring in who they are and the brilliance of what puts them into that job or that function that you hired them for, and instead you try and force them into a certain hole or a peg and say you need to be this way and this way only, you are now omitting all of the brilliance of the individual. I turn companies around. I support companies in creating what we call the impossible. We set impossible goals, we go after them, and then we hit them every single time. And people always ask, how? What is it that you're doing? And the only thing that we do is remind people of the brilliance that lies within every single person that's inside of an organization. And so that's why I say, if you are an individual right now listening to this and you clock in and you clock out, you could show up as a completely different person. And I promise you, people around you are going to notice, and your life and your career and your bank balance and your fulfillment and your freedom and your joy, all of it's going to expand. If you run a team, you're going to do it for yourself and then bring it into your organization and support your entire organization. This is not a sales pitch for you to hire me or my services. This is a way for us to freely share the information so that you can apply it yourself.
I work for an amazing company right now. And let me tell you, so I joined about 3 years ago, and the entire leadership team has adopted these new ways of being and adopted bringing these tools into not only their own lives, but have brought it into business. It has started to shift the entire culture of the business, so much so that we pour into our teams, we pour into our people. Our goal is to develop them, to help them, support them to achieve their goals. And in doing so, as a company, we achieve ours. It is possible. If you're sitting there thinking there's no way, I could never imagine my company could ever be that way, it can. It absolutely can. And it starts with one person, really. And that was the other thing I learned with Rudi is it really can start with one person showing up. And that way, with that intention to make an impact, it is incredible what can happen. So I do hope you'll continue to tune into this series. But this first episode, we really wanted to start where we start with everything, really, and that's with awareness.
So awareness is the most important part of anything when you're wanting to have, be, do, and or achieve something. And we always speak into, you need to have 3 points of reference, 3 vantage points in any journey. And that is to know, where do you want to go? What would be your ultimate dream? What would be your vision? And as we call it in our business is, what would it be to have the impossible goal? What would that thing be? So now we know what we're aiming for. Then another point of reference that we really need to know is, what have we done? Because only when you observe a little bit briefly, what have you done that has gotten you to where you are right now, can you see the patterns of what you've done, what you've brought in, how you've shown up, And I'm not talking about what did you do specifically in just your business and in what marketing and promote. I mean, literally every facet of how have you shown up? Who have you been hiring? How have you fostered people inside your business to be the best versions of themselves? What kind of training and development and support and creativity and stress reduction tools and techniques are you having and bringing into your business? When you can see where you've been, you can then decide how do you want to create the shift, which is the middle vantage point. What am I doing right now? So we don't have to spend a tremendous amount of time in the past, but it's important to reflect back briefly for a moment. We spend some time looking at what did you do? Then we look at where are we now and what are we doing right now? And then we can forecast the future forecasting of that incredible, impossible goal. For you, it could be you want to make more money as an individual, or it could be you want to create a shift or a change in the culture of your organization. And what we want to challenge you to do right now is to look at your life and pick any area. This could be a relationship, it could be finances, it could be freedom, it could be health, or it could be your organization.
I believe, and I know Rudi believes as well, that when there's one area of your life that isn't working, that you're not happy in, or you feel stuck in, it's never compartmentalized to just that one area. It affects every single area. Now, simultaneously, when you focus on one area of your life and on improving one area of your life, you, in the same way, you impact every area of your life. And what we want to do is inspire you to really think about, number one, like, are you happy? Are you happy with your job? Are you happy at work? As Rudi said, you spend more time at work than you probably do with your own children, potentially your own spouse. And, these are the people that you're spending the most amount of your time, and your time is your greatest currency. So this is the place where you're going to have some of the greatest growth, the greatest learning, the most aha moments, but it's also the place that you get to practice. And what I mean by that is, all the tools that we learn are so, with meditation and how to manage stress and anxiety, and all of that's really, really important. But it's not powerful if you don't actually take those tools with you to work and you start to use them within your day. But it takes first taking stock of, okay, here's what is working for me. These are the things that aren't working for me. This is the story I'm telling myself about these things. These are the people that really trigger me. It's really taking like zooming out and looking at, is it, I might be pointing the finger and blaming and saying, well, the company doesn't care about me and this and that and whatever. But what if there was something that you could do to shift that without anything else having to change?
So when we talk about having awareness, these are the conversations that we're referring to. And in business, so many organizations, and this applies to somebody in their personal life who wants to see a marked improvement in one area, they hyper focus in on something. For most businesses, revenue. They want to grow the revenue. But if you're only growing one portion in your business, that's called fractal growth. And if you have fractal growth, it's going to break the totality of what you're doing because you cannot expand one part without the next. In a relationship, in health, in well-being, if you're pouring all your time, your effort, your energy, for me, in my first 20 years of my working career, I poured all my time, effort, and energy into work. I wanted to create wealth. And so I would work 7 days a week. I would work 18-hour days. I would sleep 4 hours. I would not focus on my health, my well-being, my sleep. It was all just one area. And the system is going to break because it's under strain. The same thing applies inside of your life or inside of your business. And so if you're only focusing on driving revenue, but you're not focusing on wellness, you're not focusing on developing your people, you're not focusing on creating an environment where people work together and there's camaraderie, and you're not instilling tools in your business that support people to grow other aspects, then you're going to have literal fractal growth inside that business, which is going to put strain on the business, and it's going to eventually break something inside the organization. And typically it's people, and the people break down and then they get burnout and they're so tired and they cannot pour themselves into what it is that they're doing. And I want to stress right up front that this is the easiest shift that you can create inside your business, but it has to start with awareness. And when you just spend a little bit of time focusing in on, are we only focusing in on driving revenue? Are we only focusing on growing the marketing department? Are we only focusing in right now on hiring new recruits? Like, what is that one area? And if you could, which you can, pour a little bit into every single team, every department, the entire shift inside your business, then you have the power or the potential to create a long-lasting shift inside your business.
I think another powerful question to ask in terms of building awareness, and again, not necessarily to hone in on that answer yet, because we are going to support you in that in the coming episodes, but it's to really ask yourself, based off of, as Rudi said, where you are and where you want to go, what's in the gap, right? And not only what's in the gap for you, but what's in the gap for all the people that you work with. Like, is it possible that absolute, what you would have maybe said, impossible target or impossible dream that you have for yourself within a business or that you have for your business, what if it was possible? What if there are just some collective limiting beliefs that are standing in the way? That would be in the gap. What if the overall just tone and energy of what's going on in your office and the team is one of the glass is half full rather than the glass is half empty? What if there were some tiny little things that you could tweak and change that would close that gap? And what we're saying is, first, you have to take the steps to ask the questions to make room for the answers. And when you start to ask the questions, you're ready for the answer. So Rudi, if you had to give a couple of questions just as thought starters to get our listeners going, what would they be?
I think that I'm actually going to give you a story to emphasize the point, because I think that people can learn easier through an example of something. And then you can get to the questions that you can ask yourself. I was brought into an organization, young company, and they wanted to grow. And they were focusing simply in only on the revenue side of their business. They had 10 salespeople, and each salesperson had a quota of $30,000 that they had to hit every single month. They'd only had one person that had ever hit the $30,000 mark, which was at $27,000. So I'm being generous. And everybody else averaged around about $15,000, the lowest person at $7,000. And so they weren't hitting the expectation of the company. The owner said, man, I'm desperate to grow the business, and here's what I need support in. I spent a little bit of time within the business just to learn about each person, asking some questions, and just trying to understand what was happening inside the business. And what I want you to take from the story first is that each person, whether you're an individual and you're talking about this in your personal capacity, or whether you're in business, you have a belief around what you believe to be possible for you as a person. Businesses, whether it's a department or an entire organization, has a collective belief system. And what we support people in, and what I literally do for a living every single day, is expanding what people believe is possible. And when you believe something else is possible for you, you create that shift, all of a sudden you start hitting these impossible goals, and you do them with ease. With this organization, I identified in literally spending a week with them, and I'm talking about not even in person. These were Zoom calls, these were phone call interviews, and just a couple of probing questions. I identified that every single person that was selling these packages, they didn't have a tremendous amount of money. We were talking about young 20 to 30-year-old sales teams, and they were selling very expensive packages that they could not afford. And every time I probed them around what they were selling, the overriding communication, the terminology they were using was around, well, this is very expensive. Oh, most people can't afford it. When we get on the calls, we're nervous or we're anxious because we know people can't afford it. And so all I did was set them up to believe, what if it was possible that everyone you speak to can afford it? And they couldn't make that bridge. It was too big of a jump. So my closest next step was, can we agree you can't afford the package? And they said, yes, we can agree that we, as the individual salespeople, we cannot afford this right now based on where we are. Yes, we could if we saved, but right now, no, we can't afford it. I said, okay, is it possible that the person you're speaking to might be able to afford it? Not could, might. And if they might be able to afford it, then there's possibility. And they were like, well, I guess it is possible. And I said, okay, so if it's possible, could we go into the meeting expecting that they can afford it? Because they've scheduled the call, they're aware of what you're doing and what you're offering. And that one subtle shift created a profound shift. Now, to really change the intensity of this story, I went into that sales team prior to that meeting and said to them, the new expectation for every salesperson by the end of that month was $100,000. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. And I've shared the story previously, and I share it again because it's so powerful. We then said, you haven't been hitting the $30,000 quota. The new expectation is going to be 100. And now I'm going to give you the tools to be able to do it. And all we did was created that one very, very subtle shift of saying, is it possible? And it created the biggest shift.
I love the story that Rudi just shared because it really demonstrates something powerful, that so often we can just get in the mode of doing the same things that we've always done, expecting different results, which normally doesn't happen. And so easily also when we're in a company, especially where we're surrounded by a lot of different people, there becomes this collective belief and expectation, and everyone's sharing their own beliefs about what's possible, and we're enrolling each other in what we think is possible. And sometimes just having someone come in with a mirror, which is what I think Rudi does so beautifully within organizations, and what I know I try to do is, along with the leadership team in the organization that I work in, is to constantly be asking ourselves, like, do we think this is impossible because we've just never seen it done? Or maybe we've never had that demonstrated for us, or because we are looking at past results that we think are going to be indicative of future ones. And that's where having that outside party to say, whoa, 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 let's just take a minute. I'm going to ask you questions. Let's think about this a little bit differently. And typically, you'll start to see possibility. And when, as a team or as an individual, you start to see possibility, things open up. You start acting different. Your behavior changes. And we'll talk about how, just by helping teams identify, or helping yourself identify limiting beliefs that you have, will completely revolutionize your business, because we are limitless beings. And we believe that just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean that it can't. And that when you get a group of people together believing that, then watch out. Anything is possible.
So I know that for every person to take information on as their own, they first need to understand, or at least resonate with, how is this going to create an impact in their life. And if you can create that shift by listening to this episode today, you're going to be more primed and prepared to absorb any information that's going to follow. So I want to share a story I wasn't planning on sharing with you today. And this is going to be another example of what does it look like when you take this information and you apply it to an individual, not within an organization. And so, Anniston shared in the very beginning of my journey of joining the organization where she was working, having seen what did it look like before somebody came in with the practices and the principles that I bring into business, and then to see the profound shift. We turned that company around from its worst revenue and within 8 months to its highest revenue, and then maintained that for a 4-year period that I supported the organization. And it still today continues to do incredibly well. And so it's long-lasting and long-reaching effects inside the business. But what about the individual? I will never forget, long before, and I mean 2 years, maybe 3 years before I joined that organization, Anniston and I were living in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area, and she walked into the bedroom one day, and I had just come home from work, and she had this white look on her face. And she said to me, "So I just got a call from my boss." And I could see the look of shock. And so immediately I was preparing myself for something drastic, like what happened? And she said, they just asked me if I would be prepared to join a mentorship program to be groomed to take over as the leader of the organization. And I jumped up. I was so excited for her. It meant I would have to move. I would have to leave my company. It means we would have to leave Cincinnati, move to Miami. I mean, there were so many things that would have to happen. But in an instant, I was already in the congratulations stage. And then she said, no, we're not moving. There's no congratulations, because I turned them down. And I was like, why would you turn them down? I just don't understand. What? You just got, like, babe, this is incredible. And she was like, no, I know, I don't want that. And at the time she said, I don't want to move. I don't want to leave our home. I don't want to, make you leave your company. She gave me all these reasons for no.
I also said I was like, no, I want to, my dream, my vision is to impact people, to be, still thinking that you can't do that in a business, right?
And so what I love so much about this story is, at the time, she didn't want to take the risk, didn't think it was possible, believed that you had to compartmentalize who you are and how you show up, and that the spiritual stuff that we were doing at home in the confines of our bedroom, and I mean like meditating and journaling, and then, speaking to groups in our living room, and it was contained in our house. But the minute we left that house, we had to be prim and proper Rudi and Anniston, and we had to leave the woo-woo and the intention and the motivation and all of that had to stay at home. What's so amazing about that is having the opportunity to have somebody come into a business and create that shift, and to set the example of what it looks like, whether it happens in this case to be a husband or whether it's somebody else inside your organization. The best way to learn is always through observing somebody else's behavior, not through running around telling people how to do it. It's simply demonstrating it. And in this example, I demonstrated what was possible, but Anniston absorbed the possibilities. And today she leads a very large organization, and she is a powerful, committed, and dare I say, fierce leader. And what I love so much about the organization that she works with is they're a team of powerful female leaders, and what they are doing and how their company rallies around them. I mean, it is the ultimate example of what does it look like to lead with a conscious heart in business. And if we told you the growth of their company, the revenue of their company, the joy and the fulfillment ratings that their company has, you wouldn't believe me, because it would sound like a pipe dream. But I see it every single day, and it's incredible.
I represent, I believe, a pretty large population of people who want to be a leader, because I did. I absolutely wanted to lead. I just didn't believe I could. And so that was what Rudi was saying, and what he was seeing in my behavior was, I was like, oh, no, 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 no. And then I found a story, and because I had never really led a team. I had small little teams here and there. And I knew that I was capable of doing my job. But when it came to actually developing people and pouring into people, I didn't have the confidence. And so many leaders face this at every new level. It feels uncomfortable. And to be able to have someone to support you, or someone to remind you that, hey, this is normal. It's normal to feel uncomfortable. It's normal for this to feel a little scary and out of your comfort zone. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. Leaders aren't born, they're developed. And I think in organizations, we forget about that. I once heard this quote. It was a story of this man sitting across from the CFO of the business. And he was saying, hey, I really want a budget to develop our teams. We need to bring in someone to develop our teams. And the CFO said, well, but what if we develop them and they all leave? What if they're so happy and so fulfilled, and they've found their passion that they want to leave the organization? And then the man who brought this idea to the CFO said, well, what if we don't develop them and they all stay? And I remember reading that, and I was like, wow, that's profound. Because you have to think about, your business, or the business that you're a part of. It's a collective of individuals, and individuals bring all their stuff with them. Wherever you go, there you'll be. You bring all of the baggage with you into the office, into the boardroom, into that meeting. And if you don't develop your people, or if you aren't developing yourself, then that is going to be indicative of the growth of the business. The individuals become the collective energy of the business. It's never just one person.
So this episode is really about 2 points of reference today, and we want to bring awareness to the fact that you have to look at who are you, how are you showing up, where have you been, what is happening right now in your immediate environment, and if you could create the change, which you can, what would you want to change? So that is so vitally important. And then the next thing, which is the second vantage point I want you to pay attention to, is that it's scary. And that on the other side of doing something you've never done is everything you've ever wanted. And that when I first thought, wow, you know what, I'm going to take what I believe and bring it into corporate America, I was petrified. Anniston was so nervous. My brother actually phoned me and said, Rudi, I know the business and you're going to get fired. Do not do this. It's going to be the most embarrassing and humiliating thing of your life. Do not do this. And it just fueled me to really say, you know what, F it. I'm going to give it a go, and I'm going to show up as me. And if they like it, great. And if they don't, they don't. And I always ask myself, what if I never did that? What if I never had the courage to show up like that and create that impact? What would have happened to the lives of the people in the business? I wouldn't have my business today. I would still be somewhere waiting for when I could one day show up. And I just want to challenge you. If you were going to spend enough time today just focusing on the awareness of where you are, where you've been, where you want to go, what it is that you bring to the table right now that is manifesting in your life, and if you could create the change, what would you want that to look like? And then, even though it sounds scary, put what we're saying into practice. We have intentionally today withheld some of the practices because we want to spend time in each episode focusing on one idea, giving it to you. You can digest in 20, 30 minutes and then go in and apply immediately into your life. I just want to say thank you so much for listening. We just know what comes at the end of doing this unbelievable work. We've seen it in an individual. We've seen it in a 3,000 person company. We've seen it in everything in between. And we know that it is going to work for you. From us to you, we just want to say thank you so much for spending some time with us on the Empowered Life podcast. This is all about empowering yourself so that you can live the highest and the greatest expression of who you are and who you came here to be. We want to hear from you. So I'm going to challenge you, please, if there is something you've heard in this episode that resonates with you, something that you like, something Anniston said, something that I said, something you want additional clarification on, send us a message. Reach out to us on Instagram. You can private DM us. You can find us on Facebook, or you can leave a review for us. We would love to hear from you. We want to know what resonates with you. What do you like? What do you want to hear more of? And we just want to say thank you so much, because we know that you could spend your time anywhere doing anything, and having spent some time with us, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast.